Today we're going to talk to a guy that I've been very much looking forward to talking to for a very long time. That is Supervisor from Campbell County, the Timberlake District, Justin Carwile. If you're not familiar with the Board of Supervisors, it's basically like a city council for a county. They're the governing body of the county, just without a mayor. So he's going to give us some insight onto how operations work on the Board of Supervisors, the issues they're facing. We're going to talk about a bunch of other interesting stuff as well. So buckle up, because this is Fight and Revive with Adam Boyer.
America is no longer one nation under God. Are you ready to fight for revival? Well, then you've come to the right place. Welcome to Fight and Revive with Adam
Boyer. Okay, I'm talking to Justin Carwile, Supervisor for Campbell County, Virginia in the Timberlake District. So we're going to jump right into it. Mr. Carwile, thanks for coming on the show. I appreciate it.
Oh, not a problem. Happy to be here.
Yes, I'm very glad you're able to make it. So let's just start off easy. Could you give the listeners some background as to how you got involved in politics and then eventually became a supervisor in Campbell County, and anything like that?
Yeah, absolutely. So I guess that my political journey, while it has not ended up anywhere that I had intended it to be, would have kind of kicked off in 2020. Of course, that was a very memorable year for all of us, between COVID and the, I guess, summer of love, you might call it, with BLM and everything going on with that. Of course, that was kind of carryover from previous years. But I guess I'll start off at the beginning of 2020 with kind of what really got me politically charged up was the potential assault weapons ban that Governor Northam, well, I say the Democrats in their entirety, but Governor Northam was pushing to get passed.
Yeah,
and of course,
I remember
my
that.
background, I'm a big Second Amendment guy, big proponent of firearm ownership. Grew up with firearms, grew up hunting, competitive shooting, so it's something that I've been around my entire life. And it always gets my blood boiling anytime somebody wants to limit that freedom.
Amen.
So I was in Richmond in was it January 20th, I believe it was, for Lobby Day, and it was great to see a huge turnout of people there. And in response to that, as a follow-up here in the county, and of course we had neighboring counties as well, but I got involved with the Campbell County Militia. Of course, we had our initial muster in February of 2020, so I got plugged in there with that group of individuals. And if I remember correctly, I believe it was at the original muster where I first met Supervisor Matt Klein, and we talked a little bit there, and I had I guess mentioned my interest in being involved politically, and nothing concrete there, just a brief introduction and discussion. And then in the months following that, of course, we had several other things transpire here locally. We had the Second Amendment resolution get passed by the Campbell County Board of Supervisors at the time. We had the incident in Lynchburg at 5th and Federal, which I was at. And,
I remember that.
I'm sure all the folks here locally are familiar with that, but for anybody that might be listening that's not familiar, that was an incident where it was initially a BLM protest, demonstration, but whatever you want to call it, at a restaurant that they perceived as propagating some racist culture, particularly with a picture of Governor Northam in blackface. That whole thing was kind of a gigantic misunderstanding, but I think it was just people looking for something to be mad at, given the context of the time and what all was happening. So I was at 5th and Federal with other concerned citizens at the time, defending that restaurant from being further vandalized. I mean, the building got pretty well tore up, but at the end of the night it was still standing. And then proceeding past that, we have all of the COVID mandates that were getting shoved down everyone's throats, and the potential for people losing their jobs over not wanting to get a shot from a questionable, drug with unknown side effects and long-term consequences. So,
Yeah.
in general, it was a very, very rough year for everybody, I think. A lot going on. But that is kind of the backdrop that got me more politically plugged in and wanting to do more than just watch news stations and be mad about everything that was going on. I actually wanted to be involved and kind of do my small part and kind of push back against a lot of that as much as I possibly could. So getting plugged in here at the local level of government was kind of the best way I saw to do that and make that impact.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that incident at Fifth and Federal, because I actually think about that the other day, and that was a pretty big deal at the time. Lynchburg, not a huge city really, and so that was something we had never really experienced up till that time. But I'm very thankful for the militia and thankful for folks like yourself that are in it that showed up that night and continue to be in the militia. So I'm very thankful for that, and I'm glad we have folks like you getting involved, running for office, and being on the board of supervisors, which I'm hoping to run for something one of these days. Not quite yet, but at some point when a door opens and an opportunity is opened up, I'd like to get involved as well. So that's kind of a good segue. You kind of stopped at the board of supervisors. So what got you, what were the events like that led you to run to board of supervisors? Did someone talk to you? Did you hear about a vacancy, or what happened there?
So you broke up there a little bit, so I think I understood the question was kind of what was the process and what really got me into running for the board specifically?
Yes.
Okay, so as I mentioned, I had spoken to Matt Klein, at least on the occasion of the initial militia muster, if memory serves, but I could be wrong on that. And I think the way that kind of transpired was coming into 2021, it was thought that the Timberlake district would be an empty seat. Susan Hogg, the preceding supervisor for this district, was not going to run for re-election. At least, that was the thought at the time, and I don't know if that had been discussed or what, but that was the understanding, was that somebody would be needed to fill this seat. And of course, we always look for good individuals to try to fill these seats. I mean, we're extremely happy to see it when people step up and recognize an opportunity and say, hey, that's a capacity that I would like to serve in. We see that in this election this year. We have folks that step up to the plate and say, hey, I would like to try to serve in that capacity. But I think a lot of times, because it's government to some degree is this kind of out of sight, out of mind thing, and it's not something that any of us ever really, I guess, necessarily see us going into. I mean, I've got my own life with a full-time job and kind of my path picked out. So some of those opportunities and chances to serve just get missed. So Matt Klein had mentioned, said, hey, if you would be interested in running for the board of supervisors, there could be potential, being that I lived in the Timberlake district and it would looking to be an open seat. And I had discussed it with some of my associates in the militia, because it's like, well, with everything going on with the attack on our Second Amendment freedoms and ability to own firearms, of course, we're a like-minded group of individuals, and we want somebody in these positions that will do the job well, but also is of the same political persuasion and has a lot of the same values and ideals. So it kind of started just as a discussion. I was like, well, Justin, you could do this. This would be, this could work out. And it was kind of a joke at first, but the more I thought about it, I was like, this might be the best chance I get to plug in and kind of make a difference and serve my community. I mean, being a lifelong Campbell County resident, having gone to grown up here, gone to school here. I feel like I have as much of a feeling for the values of the people of the county as anybody.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like, well, if, as they say, if not me, then who? So instead of just being upset about everything, it was a chance to step in. So Matt helped me through the process as far as the paperwork, because it was all unfamiliar territory to me, and just kind of explained the process and how to go through everything. And from that point, once I got the process kind of laid out in front of me, I was able to just go through the steps and kind of knock it out. I will say that the state has certainly made it a little easier. Now you can go online and through the Department for Elections, you can get an entire packet that's all put together and well laid out that explains how to go through the steps to become eligible to be elected on a local level. So they certainly improved that, and that's kind of how that went. It's just word of mouth and talking to folks that were already plugged in and seeing an opportunity to serve.
That's really cool, and I'll get back to a follow-up question on that in a second, but I do want to say real quick something I had forgotten to say the first time is I heard you mention it was 2020 that made you get involved in politics because of the stuff we saw, or more so anyway, is the stuff we saw in the COVID mandates, the lockdowns, Northam and his tyranny here in Virginia, and that was obviously something that led to a big victory for Governor Youngkin. But I think even more than that, I think 2020 made a lot of people really wake up and want to get involved and inspire them, because the tyranny was so obvious. They weren't trying to hide it anymore, and they were just going for it, their agenda. The far left was, or even just the left in general. And so another guy I've talked to a couple times on the show, you may know him, Brad Driscoll. He's actually on the last episode on the show, and he also got involved in 2020, and he's now an activist in Appomattox, and he's writes for the Bull Elephant. And so I think a lot of people really, that were what you would call, quote-unquote, normal people, got involved in politics and woke up to it and decided, I want to do something, and I can do something. And I think 2020, the left may have gone too far. I know it didn't really show in the midterms, but that's one of the reasons I have hope for 2024.
Oh, absolutely. There's no question that everything that happened that year, I won't say necessarily that it woke people up. Now, I'm certain that there are some people that got a new perspective on certain things and maybe were a little more unaware of some agendas and just how bad things were getting. I mean, I was not unfamiliar to politics and the current events and what's going on, but until you really plug in with a political committee or some other local form of government outside of election day, you think, okay, I go in the voting booth, I vote, and that's my involvement in the process. That's what I do. So the way that whole year went, it definitely, I would say it didn't necessarily wake people up, but it got people motivated to do something with based on their feelings and everything they were seeing, instead of just being mad about it.
I do agree. I think that's a good perspective on it. You probably vocalized that a little, or voiced that a little better than I did. So moving on, and I'm not gonna. I know. So this is a big question, and I know you can't. We're not gonna spend so much time here, and I know there's a lot of different ways you can answer this. I'm sure you do a lot. But basically, what are some of your main responsibilities on the Board of Supervisors, and what is it exactly y'all do? I think people know, like I said in the intro, the governing body of the county, but what actually does that entail other than meeting and talking with your other supervisors once a month?
Right. Now that's a fantastic question, and one I get all the time. And I would say that our civics classes in our schools are not doing a great job of teaching this, and maybe they do a better job than I remember, and it's just as as a student, I didn't pay close enough attention, but I get that all the time. What does
I wouldn't count
local
on it.
board really do? And that's going to change from state to state, depending on how they have things set up. Now, Virginia being a Dillon rule state, I would say our localities probably don't have as much flexibility as localities in some other states might. But primarily, if I had to put it in a nutshell, the biggest thing that your local government does comes in the form of dealing with property zoning and ordinances. So the way that works, obviously zoning, you've got land that's zoned, whether it's business, agricultural, residential, and that dictates what can be developed and built on certain parcels within the county. And the other part being ordinances, which is going to be anything that the state relegates down to be handled at the local level because they don't feel that, or they feel that citizens would be better served if certain matters were handled at the local level versus at the state level, just due to the differences in areas. Now that can, that's both a blessing and a curse sometimes, because a lot of times we'd like to have more freedom locally than we do. But then other times we have some localities that would not be as, because they don't share the same values and culture that we do. It's a give and take. So like if I imagine that there are certain more liberal areas of the state that if they had the freedom to do so, they would have extremely strict firearms laws and regulations that we would consider
for sure
on our rights. Thankfully, because this being a Dillon rule state and the current state laws, we're protected from those overreaches in those counties. But that's a double-edged sword. With zoning, obviously the biggest thing there is the idea with zoning is to oversee development of the county, so that way you don't end up with safety and health issues, and you kind of get to better manage the development of the county and make sure that you don't end up with industrial parks next to developed neighborhoods and schools, and it's kind of a safety net. In addition to that, of course, you've got your local taxes and the funding of various local institutions such as the sheriff's office, your rescue squads, emergency services, and schools. So the Board of Supervisors is a way to give citizen oversight to those entities, and it's a checks and balances. Now, those institutions, of course, the schools are run by, they have their own administration that runs that. Obviously, the sheriff runs the sheriff's office and so on. So the Board of Supervisors gets to have an overview of those departments, and while we are not involved in the running of those departments, we get an opportunity to make sure that they are functioning properly and meeting the needs of the citizens. So that's the checks and balances system you've kind of got there.
Yeah, and honestly, I will say, I think slowly people become more aware and more interested even in the stuff like the Board of Supervisors does, or the governing body like that, city council or whatever, because I think personally one of the reasons is, even more than just 10 years ago, people care about that, is the rise of Airbnb. And you may have some story on this, I don't know, or something to say about this, because I know I've heard a couple stories of people either being denied or allowed to have an Airbnb and the neighbors don't like it, or for some reason they end up petitioning the Board of Supervisors, and it's a whole mess. And a lot of counties and cities in the country, you hear about a lot, are just banning Airbnbs because I guess just it's a hassle. I don't know why exactly, but I don't know if you have any insight on that. I just thought that was kind of an interesting observation.
Yeah, so I guess you could throw this under it is a matter of zoning and the special use permit, but you kind of, on the local level, even though we don't get to make laws and regulations, we get to determine policy and how the county kind of handles certain things. And the Airbnbs and short-term rentals in general is a fantastic example. So So the way that Campbell County currently handles that, we divide up rentals into, or short-term rentals into what we call a rooming house and a touring house. It's like a rooming or boarding. So the key difference between the two would be in a rooming or boarding house, the rental unit is located on a property that is usually inhabited by the owning individual. So if somebody has a house and let's say they want to rent out their basement, like they have a separate living unit in the basement or a guest house on the property or something, and they want to rent that out. I can't think of a case where we have denied a special use permit for that. The idea there being that we are less likely to get these complaints and nightmare stories of bad renters coming in, or weekend guests and such, because you've got the owner of that property located there at the residence. So the Airbnb specifically
Gotcha.
would fall under what we call a touring house, which is a property that is not owned, or that is not inhabited by the owner. And I mean, I have a lot of personal views on that doesn't necessarily tie in with the way the board handles all those. The only touring house that I can recall approval of in the 2 years that I've been on the board, the context of that was the individual that had applied for it had a third-party group that was going to be managing the property. So while she was here currently, there was understanding that the owner would be leaving the area, but was going to have a third party managing that building. So really, it all just comes down to accountability. Because if you've got the thought is, if you have properties that are owned by some entity and they're not located here in the area, and you start having bad actors or people come in and causing problems in these Airbnbs and other short-term rentals, we don't have a good way to reach out to somebody, make them aware of the issues, and hopefully get some corrective actions on that. Now that should be far less of an issue when you've got somebody that is residing in the residence. So that's kind of the division we have on that currently, and I think that we will probably end up seeing that shift. And personally, I think that if you own a property, it is yours to do with as you please, with some obvious restrictions for safety and such. But I'm not really interested in limiting what somebody does with a residence. If you want to do Airbnb, that's personally fine with me, because I don't like the idea of controlling people or trying to prevent issues before there are some. It's kind of like it's just like the idea of gun control. The idea is if we just strip people of freedom, then we'll never have to deal with the repercussions of it. And while I certainly understand that approach, it's not one that I share.
That's a great example, and I think everything you said makes a lot of sense. I think we'd be a lot better off if more people in the government said, I don't want to be getting involved in people's lives more than I have to, like you just did. So I applaud you for that. So I'll kind of combine these two. I don't want to drag this out too much longer, but I'll kind of combine these two questions in that. What are the most pressing needs you think currently are present in Campbell County for people who are here locally, maybe in listening to this? And that's your jurisdiction, obviously, Campbell County. And then, and it might be the same, I'm not sure, but then the country as a whole, what do you think just are some of the biggest issues we face as we head into the thick of election season?
Sure. Well, thankfully, when it comes to the needs here in the county, just like most of the job with being on the board, it's very administrative task. There's nothing really political about it. Now, you can have certain opinions one or the other that might kind of shape policy, but for the most part, it's apolitical administrative stuff. At least that's the way I see it. So here in the county, if I had to come up with a short list of, I think, our challenges and things we can do to address them. I guess first thing I have to hammer home is I don't think I don't think government's great at fixing a whole lot of anything. So the idea that the government's the answer to the challenges isn't really the way I go with it. But there are certain things that we certainly can do to get government out of the way and allow things to improve. So starting off, I would say housing. Of course, that's an issue nationally, especially right now with the higher with the Fed rate increases. So mortgage rates are going higher. People are having a harder time affording homes. So one of the things that has been discussed, I think it's been discussed before my time on the board and continues to be kind of talked over, and hopefully we'll see some changes here in the next code update or two. But it centers around the agricultural lot size and how we handle residential zoning throughout the county. So currently, I think if memory serves, we have a 2.5 acre limit, I believe it is, to be zoned agricultural. So if you go under 2.5 acres, you can't carry an agricultural zoning on a piece of property. You have got to go into residential. So I think some of the challenges you run into, particularly from a developer's standpoint, or somebody or a company wants to come in and develop a large tract of land for neighborhoods, is because prices of everything continue to go up. Well, obviously land prices are doing the same thing. So if I'm a developer, I'm going to want to get as many parcels out of a large tract of land as I can, because I want to build as many houses as possible. Now, we have certain things in code we can't let houses be right on top of each other, but we've got restrictions and minimum sizes on all that. But I think the county either needs to look at changing that agricultural lot size, because that has to kind of play hand in hand with the comprehensive plan for the county, or the county just has a general policy going forward that says, hey, regardless of the kind of comprehensive plan, we look at residential developments kind of separate from that plan. So where your commercial developments and businesses are going to be, that doesn't change. But as far as developing neighborhoods and building houses, we would be, friendly to the idea of being able to go to a residential zoning anywhere in the county, regardless of what the comprehensive plan says. Because again, it goes back to, we want to help developers, get the bang for their buck, so they actually come in and build more homes. And the more homes we have, the more that's going to push prices, home prices down, and allow for people to get into that market. In addition to that, for expanding housing, and this isn't something that the Board of Supervisors directly handles, but we get to work hand in hand with CCUSA, which is the utility service for the county, because we need to expand our water lines. So fortunately, a whole lot of these challenges don't directly affect the Timberlake area, because this is the most built-up area of the county. We've got a large amount of water lines already in this district. As far as housing and development goes, there's not a whole lot of ground left over here that doesn't have something put on it. So this issue or this development doesn't affect this district so much, but it certainly affects all the rest of the districts as we continue to see growth coming out of the Lynchburg area and expanding more into the county. So there are certainly policy changes and things we can do with utility projects to help push housing. The other biggest thing that I would say is just employment. Obviously, we've got to have jobs and we've got to have places for people to work in the county if we want to continue to grow and develop and provide for the new residents we have coming in, as well as sustain the folks that are already living here. So part of that is the continued investment in the industrial park, Seneca Park, and the IDA's investment in that park and establishing buildings over there so companies can move into existing buildings and get to work, doing what they do. And that also provides a tax benefit to the citizens of the county, because if you have these buildings that are owned and operated by the IDA and you've got businesses moving in and renting those buildings, Well, all that money comes back to the county. So that's money that the businesses are paying into taxes to help support the county that isn't having to be supported by the residents of the county. So it's sharing the load of the taxes. Now, in addition to that, a project that we've already got going, and this was kicked off before I got onto the board, is the expansion of fiber internet through the entirety of the county, or the vast majority of it. And that's something that I think has been approached at least once I know of, maybe more than that. But right now we're in the middle of expanding fiber optic internet through the county in partnership with Chantel, Firefly, and River Street, I believe it is. So we've got 3 existing internet providers that are running fiber optic cables throughout the county to expand internet service, and this covers, like I said, as much of the county as we can cover. I believe it was over 3,000 residences that would be added into, would be getting this improved internet service. So as work from home becomes a bigger thing, and remote work, and I mean, people need internet. Even schools, you have to have internet service to do a lot of the schoolwork that you're getting now. So people want to be in an area where they've got that service. So it certainly doesn't make the county look like a very inviting place to live if a large swath of the county doesn't have any reliable internet service. So that project, like I said, is in tandem with existing companies, and that's being funded by a mix of local tax dollars, state grant money, and the companies themselves investing.
Yeah, that's very important note. I like that you brought that up, because I've noticed, actually, even just driving around I drive pretty much every day from Gladys to the Timberlake area, and I work in between the 2 areas, and I've seen in quite a few places, even just going up and down neighborhoods and stuff for jobs, just seeing I've seen a lot of the equipment and the guys out there working on it for fiber optic, and I've just noticed that a lot recently, and so I thought that was interesting that you brought it up. And I think people would tend to think, 3,000 residences, that's not that much, but when you factor in that, depending on the numbers you look at, Campbell is 52 to 60-ish thousand people in population, so that's a pretty good chunk of people that are getting fiber in addition. So I think that's some issues that people don't really think about until it affects them, and they like to complain about, but it's very much goes under the radar, and it's not something people really think about when it comes to holding office and dealing stuff like that when in office. So as we wrap up here, obviously, got to talk elections a little bit. We're heading to a big election year in Virginia. We got the off-year elections, 2023. Every state seat in the state Senate, every seat in the House of Delegates up for grabs. Republicans currently have a 4-seat majority in the Senate, and the Democrats, I believe, have a 3-seat also a 4-seat majority in the Senate, and Republicans in the House of Delegates. I might have said that wrong. What I was trying to say is the Republicans have a 4-seat majority in the House of Delegates, and I believe the Democrats have a 23-19 or 22-18. You can correct me on that if I'm wrong. Something like that, majority in the Senate. So, first of all, what do you think Republicans need to do as far as campaigning goes? I was listening to Mark Peake, our state senator, the other night, and he was talking about how he's very optimistic that we're going to take over the Senate. Do you see the same thing happening where we regain the legislature, maybe the chambers swap or flip, or they hold where they are? Or what on earth do you think is going to happen this November in Virginia elections?
Right. Well, I certainly wish I had a crystal ball that I could shake and get a better idea of how that's all going to shake out. I think there's a couple of things that we certainly have going for us, at least here in the state, as far as I'm aware, or at least from my perspective. We haven't had any state-specific, hot-button issues that come to the forefront of my mind. Obviously, with this last election when Youngkin got elected, there were a ton of hot-button issues that really energized the voters across the board on both sides. So you saw a good turnout there, and thankfully Youngkin came out ahead on that vote. I haven't seen anything from Youngkin that is polarizing. I think that's in large part due to the fact that when you have a split government between the House and the Senate. You don't see a lot of things make their way to the governor's desk just because they get shot down in fighting between the two houses. But I think what it would be really nice to see, and this would apply both state and federal as far as the Republican Party is concerned, is we have a lot of conservatives that I think are feeling very disillusioned with the entire system and entire process, and maybe they are seeing that on the liberal side of the aisle as well. But I think we are all tired of seeing Republicans get elected and not seeing results. I know the first couple of years of when Trump got elected, the first 2 years, I mean, they had the House and the Senate on the federal government, and we didn't get any big moves out of that. Everyone just kind of sat by and said, okay, great, we won, we've got control, but there was no taking advantage of that opportunity to really put forward any policies or any changes that really shook things up and actually really made a huge difference. Now, certainly economically speaking, those were far better times than we're currently seeing. But I think Republicans really need to look at their base and what their base would like to see, but really be forward thinking and come up with new policy and a way forward that would actually give people hope of a change. Because we're seeing it repeat with every election cycle, regardless of who's in office. We don't seem to be making forward progress. There's no hope for a better tomorrow. It's the same talking points. It's the same tired ideas that never go anywhere. There's no creativity. There's no ingenuity, and there's no spark that really gives people something to look forward to. So I think the country as a whole would benefit from seeing more of that. Instead of this voting for people based on kind of personalities, if you will, so you really go to voting on the policies and the ideas that they're going to put forward and hopefully make a difference and see things turn for the better.
I'm so glad you mentioned that, because one of my favorite things Michael Knowles says, I've brought him up a lot on the show recently. One of my favorite things he says is that you have to offer, and I don't know if this quote originated with him, but he says you have to offer voters a choice, not an echo. And that's one of the things the Democrats are very good at, is they're never an echo. The Democrats have a clear agenda. They tell the voters, this is what we're going to do. Even if the voters disagree with it, they tell them, if you let me, this is what we're going to do. California is a great example. We're going to destroy this state if you elect us. And California voters keep electing them, and then they'll complain about it, and then they'll keep electing them. Republicans are so bad about that, especially the establishment type. They're an echo. Another thing Knowles says is you vote for a Republican, you vote for a Democrat, you're still going to get higher spending, you're still going to get into more foreign wars, you're still going to get more immigration. And that's one of the things, it's one of the ways it's been for years. I hope that tide is kind of turning now as we see kind of this new generation of Republican leaders starting to come in more and more, creep in federally. Some of the older generation, the Mitch McConnells of the world, kind of starting to fade out slowly. I think within the next 10 years or so, we're going to see a drastic shift in from kind of the old Republican way to the new. And I hope the new Republican way, the kind of populist conservative way, is to offer voters a choice. The Republican strategists will tell you, don't bring up transgenderism. Transgenderism does not poll well. Youngkin was a great example of this. He campaigned on the culture war issue of giving parents rights in the school to know what their kids are reading, and then we've seen him pass the ordinance that parents have to be notified, and if a child wants to quote unquote change their gender in school, the schools have to notify the parent. They have to get parental approval, which obviously is not all the way, but that's a good first step. And so that's one of the things I think Republicans really need to do better, and I hope they're going to do better as we move forward. So that's my thoughts anyway. As we wrap up, and I'm about out of time, but as we wrap up, I'll just ask, are you eyeing, or not eyeing even, but are you leaving the door open, I should say, for any run for anything in the future, maybe some state office or something higher? Or you think you're just content on the Board of Supervisors, or you kind of waiting around to see, biding your time?
I can't say that I'm eyeing a higher office. Now, I certainly always leave the door open to what the future holds. So I don't try to put myself too much in a box. But I got involved locally because this Campbell County is my home. This is my community. These are the people that raised me, that I grew up with. So I wanted to be of service to them, and I thought I could do that well. Now, obviously, when you go up to a state level office or something like that's a different ball game. You're now serving a much bigger area, a much larger community. So yeah, I don't really know what the future holds. As it stands now, I'm just enjoying being of service here to the county, and still got 2 years left on this term, and we'll see what kind of comes after that.
Yep. If the Lord told us what was going to happen in the future and we knew it all, life would be pretty boring. So I think that's a good way of looking at it. So, Mr. Carwile, I'm going to wrap it up there. Thank you so much for coming on the show. You're welcome back anytime, and very interesting conversation. Again, thank you for coming on. I really, really enjoyed it, and I appreciate it.
Oh, no problem at all. I'm glad we could finally connect and make this happen.
Me too. Thank you again. What a great conversation with Supervisor Justin Carwile. Very glad he was able to come on. Always love talking to people, especially those that hold local office. So I hope you enjoyed. I hope these interviews inspire you to get involved and make a difference in your community. It's not that hard to run for local office. I know that almost sounds like understating it. Yeah, it's going to take up a few months of your time with door knocking, but once you get in, it's also really not that hard. As he said, it's not like you're constantly overwhelmed with things to do. You pretty much, with Board of Supervisors anyway, you have a once-a-month meeting. Other than that, you're dealing with some stuff during the rest of the time, maybe by email and stuff. But for the most part, guys, this is stuff y'all could do with just a little bit of research and talking to people. And even if you don't want to run for office, you could encourage other people to. You can get involved with campaigns, because let's face it, voting once every 4 years is not going to cut it. So, folks, I do appreciate y'all watching. I'm trying to reach more people with this channel, trying to boost some videos, get them out to more people. So if you would subscribe to the channel and help get this in front of more people, that would be great. And liking this specific video and helping get it in front of more people as well, that would be awesome. Check out the other interviews, like the one I did with Ann Parker, who's on the school board, or another supervisor, Harrison Jones, in the Fight and Revive interviews playlist. It'd be great if you were to do that. I'm going to get on with my evening, and I'm going to let y'all get on with yours, or your day, or your morning, whatever it is with you watching. This is Fight and Revive with Adam Boyer. Thank you for tuning in.